good. I look exactly the way you wish you could. I look good. I look good. Come on. Come on. I look good.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of 360 Degrees to Success. Today we're doing something a little bit different. Part of the group of 360 Degrees to Success and what it takes to put this program together is a good friend of mine, Jeff Deskovic, and he's going to be interviewing his guest this evening. So I will turn it over to him just to let everybody know I will be answering questions live on Facebook Live. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to get them into Jeff and his guests. So without further ado, Jeff Deskovic, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Always a pleasure to be here on 360 Degrees of Success. Jeff, real quick before we launch into the meat of the interview, of course, just to recognize that you're the founder and producer of 360 Degrees of Success. I'm a recurring guest on your on the show here, and the special segments. Jeffrey Deskovic speaks ... on different topics. Tonight, of course, it's ... on prisoner reentry, and as to those special programs, I'm a co-producer. So tonight, I'm kind of excited. So I kind of changed roles. Normally, I'm simply interviewed, and maybe I do some supplemental questioning to you, Jeff. But to be sure, you do the bulk of questioning of guests. But tonight we switch roles, and I get to try my hand at being a host. I have guest hosted a radio show a number of times, but this is different. This is video, and so it's kind of a step up in the world. So kind of excited about tonight. With having said that, my guest tonight is Andre Ward. Andre, welcome to 360 Degrees of Success.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Andre and I here, we kind of got the smiles going. The bird that like the cat that ate the bird, because Andre, of course, is the host of a radio show, WBAI On the Count, which anyone who's interested in criminal justice reform certainly would be no stranger to. So again, I've actually been interviewed by Andre on his show any number of times, and so again, yet another role reversal.
Sure.
I'm interviewing you tonight, my friend. So you're on the subject of the questions. So let's start out a little bit with your background. So first of all, you have a master's degree.
Yes, I do, and before I go into that, I just really want to thank Jeffrey Bloom and 360 Degrees for allowing me this opportunity to talk. And certainly you, Jeffrey, who is quite persistent in making sure that people's voices are heard, but just being a leader in the field, and I'm grateful for that. And so, yes, I do have a master's degree in social work. I earned my master's degree from Herbert H. Lehman College in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And I'm also doing some adjunct work at McEvers College, where I teach Introduction to Social Work.
Now, did you write a thesis, by the way, to finish your master's out, or did you do the comps? Which route did you go?
I did the comps.
Ah, very good. Okay. And just what's your day job? You're with Fortune Society, aren't you?
Yes, I work with a nonprofit organization called the Fortune Society. I serve as the Associate Vice President of Employment and Education Services. And at the Fortune Society, we service over 7,000 people a year who come in and out of our doors with the idea of addressing any mental health, substance use, employment services, and other related areas that people who are coming out of prison need support with. So we strongly believe in the unification of family. We believe in the idea of also addressing policy, because it's critically important that to have real social change and fundamental criminal legal reform change, you have to address policy. So the Fortune Society specializes in policy change, but also in offering quality service provision to people who are being released from prison.
And in terms of fully acquainting our audience with your background, just prior to working at Fortune, we're going to get into your book, obviously. Maybe hold it up now. It's called A Guide to Right Thinking for Reentry. So definitely going to get into the book, but just as far as setting the background for the audience that may not be familiar with you, because it's a different platform. What type of reentry work did you do prior to Fortune Society?
Yeah, so prior to Fortune Society, I worked at an organization called Common Justice. And Common Justice essentially is a restorative justice victim services program. It's the first of its kind in the United States, wherein people who are responsible for causing harm to someone actually meets with the person that they harm in a restorative justice process. And the principles that undergirds the mission of common justice has all to do with restorative justice practices where people can heal based on the harm that they've experienced. And people who are engaged in that program, who are responsible for causing the harm, are involved in a 15-month intense anti-violence curriculum wherein they are involved in learning about themselves, learning about responsibility and accountability, and in the end, they get to meet with the person that they harmed. And through this restorative justice process in a circle like experience, the harm party is able to ask and to speak to the person that caused harm to them. And out of that experience is developed and formed agreements. Those agreements are what the harm party comes up with that the responsible party had to do in order to make things as right as possible for the harm that they caused. So it's a really unique and fantastic program headed up by Danielle Serrett, who is the executive director of that organization.
And if you were to give like a really short, quick 30-second answer, tell me about your show, WBAI On the Count, because again, it goes to your background knowledge on criminal justice issues.
Sure. So On the Count, the Prison and Criminal Justice Report is news, commentary, and analyses program around criminal justice issues. And so we deal with everything around policy, we deal with everything around analyses as it relates to why crime is created, understanding how to lift up different leaders in the space of criminal legal reform, so as to show and present a good face in society, because we know that people that have criminal justice involvement have oftentimes been relegated to spaces of demeaningness and these other kind of experiences around like not honoring and affirming them as human beings. And in no way is this to trivialize and suggest the harm that they have caused people, but the idea is to lift them up in a way to demonstrate that they have the capacity to change and transform their lives and live a life of contribution.
Got you. Now, prisoner reentry, which is going to be the focal point of our interview tonight. So that's not just a topic that you've studied, but you live, right?
Absolutely.
You're formerly incarcerated. Maybe get into a little bit of that. How much time did you do?
Sure.
How long have you been home for?
Sure. And so I was incarcerated at the age of 21 years old for being involved in an experience where a human being's life was taken. I was convicted of drug trafficking, and that experience led to me and several others involved with another rival group that was selling drugs. And subsequent to that, one of their lives was taken. And so that experience in and of itself, obviously at the time, at 21 years old, in my own development and my misunderstanding of the world and my lack of sensitivity for other human beings who were in that kind of space with me, didn't allow me to understand like the sacredness of human beings. Right. And so when I was arrested, I was sentenced to 8 to 24 years in prison. And about a year into my incarceration, I had arrived at the decision that I would completely change my life. I would become a person that would live a life of contribution and strive to empower all human beings with whom I come in contact with. And so that first year of incarceration, I went upstate, I earned my GED, and I just began to localize myself in different programs. These programs led me to begin to create programs and to interface with the administration and to interface with politicians and folk from academia to begin to empower the men that were there. And while we were there, we were part of the Lifers group, and we would also be involved in restorative justice practices. Through Vassar College, they published one of our works called Writings of Reconciliation, where we would just really write to lift up how we've caused harm and what redemptive things we were doing while inside and what we would like to do once we were released.
And you've been home for how long?
I've been home for 10 years. In fact, January 16th, the just passed marked 10 years of me being home.
Well, certainly I want to say I'm really happy that you're home and making some positive contributions to society. So nationally, the recidivism rate per Hudson Link, which is a nonprofit organization that brings college education to prisoners. Sean Pica, a man who's a friend to both of us, heading that program up as their executive director. I remember they had a stat that said that the national recidivism rate was 68%.
That's correct.
Right, okay. And so that being said, what are the things that cause recidivism Because obviously, you've been around the work, you've been doing it, you've been studying it, you know a lot of people. You yourself haven't recidivated, right? With awesome to hear. So what causes that, though?
Yeah, and so much like violence, some of the drivers of recidivism has all to do with the lack of resources, a lack of a comprehensive understanding of who you are vis-a-vis the world that you're in and the communities from which you come, and how you have to be a person that's really thinking in a way consistent with how you want to empower your life. And so when you look at issues of lack of funding in areas of education and in employment and in housing, these things set up factors that serve as drivers to people making poor decisions that ultimately end up harming other people and doing things that are inconsistent with the laws of society.
So law-abiding citizens who are business owners, managers, gatekeepers, just deciding to not employ otherwise qualified job applicants because of their criminal history. Would you say that contributes indirectly to recidivism?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I mean, with good reason. In no way can we trivialize employers' concerns about hiring people who are formerly incarcerated. Here it is, you have a business owner, someone who is invested probably their entire life to building up their business, yet to give a person an opportunity who's formerly incarcerated to be employed there is of great concern. Like, will they steal from me? Will they do those things for me? However, through the training that is offered at the Fortune Society in particular, obviously at the request and firm commitment from the CEO and our CEO of Fortune, Joanne Page, and the Executive Vice President, Stanley Richards, it's really always about making sure that we're empowering people and offering them the requisite skills to be assets in the workplace rather than liabilities. And so we do that by addressing the thinking. So we have cognitive behavioral interventions that we use to address the thinking. We offer different essential skills in the classrooms where people are taught how to interview, how to engage employers, how to be on time, how to dress a certain way. And for the average person that's in society, one would think, well, they should know that. Right? People should know that. However, many of the people with who we serve haven't had those fundamental things taught to them. And so when we had those experiences for our folk, they are likely to be much more successful in the workplace. Many of the employers, in fact, most of the employers are happy that they are employing our people because our people demonstrate the greatest gratitude.
So it sounds like there's a combination of soft skills that are needed to be learned. You mentioned how to interview, dress for success.
Sure.
But then there's also certain hard skills like technology, vocational training. You would agree with the idea that both components are necessary.
Absolutely. And so to also tie into that, we see education as a really critical component of people being able to be employed. And so when I mean education, I don't mean it in the context of having a degree conferred on you necessarily, although we encourage that, certainly getting your GED, but also education within the context of industry recognized credentials that you're alluding to, Jeff. And so at the Fortune Society, as well as many other organizations, Osborne and others, it's really about offering the requisite kind of hard skills credentials that will prepare people for success in the areas of construction and maintenance and the culinary arts and the building trades. And so at Fortune, we offer several different types of certifications, whether it be from G-Pro, the environmental literacy trainings that we offer. In addition to that, we offer culinary trainings. We offer CDL trainings for people, because the idea is to offer a broad and a wide array of opportunities for people to go into a career path.
And so if anyone is out there is watching that is a manager, that is a gatekeeper, is a business owner, then would you say that establishing rapport with Fortune and with other prisoner reentry organizations, I mean, what could they do to contribute?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good question, Jeff. There are a lot of employers that are out there that are very interested in supporting hiring people that are formerly incarcerated because some of their family members were incarcerated before. But the concern sometimes on the part of the employer is becoming visible in the world and becoming known that we're hiring people that are formerly incarcerated. In our minds at Fortune, we're grateful, obviously, that the employer would take the time and the opportunity to hire our folk. So it's always anonymity. It's not like we would lift up like this employer is hiring everyone, for that matter. And so employers can contact us and engage us through different ways. And I can get that information before we end.
Sure, and they interview applicants. No, you're not advocating like everyone that is interviewed is in the door. It's just
Absolutely.
screening, and whoever's a good fit has the skills, the aptitude, the chemistry, all of that. Correct?
Absolutely. And so we at Fortuna, of course, we have a firm criteria through which we have people go through getting prepared to go into the workplace. And so we don't just like usher people through our programs and send them off into a place of employment. They go through the training. They're engaged thoroughly by career advisors, account managers. And so this wraparound kind of support fosters a sense of support for this person, but equally so allows them to become inspired so they go into the workplace, they know how to show up in that place. So we take that very seriously. We're not going to send someone roughshod into a place of employment without them going through a rigorous kind of process of preparation, but also partnering with the employer to ensure that what the employer's needs are and what talent they need to fulfill those roles are met in an effective and adequate way.
And once again, for our listeners, again, that are watching via the live stream, Jeffrey Mark Bloom's Facebook page, if you have any questions, you can post them. Jeff is monitoring that, and we will, in fact, field live questions. And I think that
And I'm monitoring your page as well, Jeff, just
Gotcha.
in case.
Sure. So, and if you have any questions, you can pose them. Now, sometimes going back to the same neighborhood, falling back in with the same friends, same people that someone may have been involved with in the first place prior to them breaking the law and being incarcerated. Would you say that the being surrounded by positive people, talk about the social influences when
Sure.
it come together, which lead to recidivism, and in contrast to that, the opposite, being surrounded by other people in the other direction, that how that can contribute to not recidivism.
Sure.
Talk about the social aspect.
And
of
so
it.
that's the other thing. Through the workshops that we offer at the Fortune Society, it's really about building healthy social networks and defining what those things look like. And ultimately, like showing examples of those things, not only by the staff, half of whom at Fortune are formerly incarcerated, but also bringing guests in and bridging that relationship by showing that, you can have healthy social relationships and you can be successful. On the other hand, however, if you go into environments that still represent the kind of lifestyle that led you to prison, that will be your end result and consequence. It almost goes back to one of the models that Eddie Ellis and others have kind of lifted up in this tuberculosis model. And this is more on a macro level, wherein, if you have an infected area, and you all are familiar with the time where they had this era of consumption,
Right.
where people were removed from an infected area, and then they were taken and put somewhere and they were treated. And then in the end, however, they return back to the environment from which they came. But if the environment still remains infected, all you're going to do is just reinfect the person. And so when you look at this, draw this parallel between incarceration and recidivism, and you send people back to communities that are deprived of adequate resources and supports necessary to build human beings' capacity to its fullest, right? You take a person out of that, you put them in prison. If you don't offer them the right resources there, and once they're released back to that community that doesn't have those resources, you're just going to reinfect them, hence recidivism.
Speaking to the point of resources, by the way, the governor's State of the State address a few years ago, I believe it was estimated that the average cost of incarceration is $65,000 per year. So investing money up front to prevent recidivism rate for programs is definitely a tax-saving measure. So having said that, let's get to your book now.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Again, maybe we'll give the viewers another view of it, a guide to right thinking for reentry, and everyone can see that. So, what prompted you to write the book, and what are the top 2 points? Right.
Sure.
It's a really nice book. I believe it's about 100 pages.
Sure.
But what are your top 2? Why did you write the book, and what are your top 2 points as we go close to our interview time being finished?
Sure. And so I wrote the book based on my own observations of the environment that I was in. All too often I knew that, the way people function is owed much to how they think. And with the right introduction of information and knowledge, people can ultimately change the way they think, right? If you have issues with weight, if you change your thinking around how you eat, you can lose weight, right? If you have issues with how you see yourself, right? If you read things and study things in the right environment, you can change your perception of who you are and ultimately live differently. And so my observations within the systems that I was in and the facilities that I was in caused me to write this book. And so it's a really comprehensive book. It's not academic in any way. nor is it technical in any way. The idea of writing the book was really to write to a specific, obviously, group of those who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, those who are on probation or parole or under some kind of supervision, or the average human being who's never been in prison can read this book and gain something from it. And so it was important to write it in that way to make it really comprehensive. We know that some of the data and research suggests most people that enter in prison drop out in the 9th grade. Most people entering prison are reading at a 7th grade level and math at maybe a 5th grade level, respectively. And so I wrote the book to make it very comprehensive. It's an A through Z book. A stands for attitude, Z stands for zest.
Nice.
And so I think it would be obviously apropos to this show and me talking about this book that I started off with A, right, as one of the fundamental things of this book. A stands for attitude. You know, attitude is everything, right? Your attitude determines your altitude, like how you go in life. Me having this opportunity to sit here before you, Jeff Bloom, and at 360 degrees, and you, Jeff, for interviewing me, has all to do with my own attitude. Right, my attitude, my desire to give back, to live a life of contribution, and then zest, right, is Z, right, and striving to live a life that's not devoid of stress, but ultimately a life that's filled with, you know, being grateful to be able to live and to be able to be a part of the human family in a way that you can effect some meaningful change.
So Jeff, this so Andre, this is actually like the second interview on this mini tour that we're making across the media circuit. We have your book, and of course, you know, partnering with the book, of course, you know, is the game, my game, which I co-own, which was created by Leslie Robinson, Recharge Beyond the Bars Reentry Game, which is a tool to help formerly incarcerated people connect both with each other, their friends and family, by posing a series of ice-breaking type of questions, you know, because normally it's awkward. People don't know what to talk to us about, what to say,
Sure.
what not to say, what to bring up. So, Andre, you and I have played Recharge at
Yeah,
some
we
length. What was your experience like? Talk a little bit about Recharge.
So it's really interesting. I said, okay, what is Jeffrey up to? Jeffrey's like, hey, Andre, you and I are going to go on the tour. We're going to like have your book and all that kind of stuff. All right. And we're going to like talk about the game. I was like, okay, what's the game about? Right. And then, so Jeffrey and I played the game at his home and at his beautiful home. And as I played the game with Jeffrey, I said, I see why there's obviously this complements each other. The game really allows for human beings who don't know each other to understand each other deeper. So if people on the aisle have never haven't been incarcerated before, and then there are people on the other aisle that have been incarcerated before, it's a way to bridge understandings, to learn about people personally, and in ways that general conversation would not often prompt. And so in this kind of group kind of way, you get to, you know, fundamentally learn more about each other. And then for my book, right, it just deals with the individual generally.
Right, and in terms of how people can find these, find the products, certainly if you go to our website, Recharge the Game is where people can go. Now your book is on Amazon.
Yeah,
correct?
it is. It's on Amazon, and you can also order the book at Andor Publishing, LLC, at gmail.com. You can send an email there, and your book will also be able to send that book to you if you like to buy it in bulk for institutions, because that's what the book is ultimately designed for too. Not only individual, but prisons and probation and jails to share with the women and men who are incarcerated or released.
Yeah, very important not to leave the women out of the equation.
Absolutely.
That was great that you mentioned that, because when we think about, you know, people re-entering in prisons, we think male, but actually there's a significant female population that's getting
Yeah, there's an
higher.
upsurge in women
So,
being incarcerated now, more than ever.
So Andre Ward with his great book, you know, A Guide to Right Thinking for Reentry, doing prisoner reentry work. Listen, thank you very much for the work that you are doing and coming on the show.
And thank you for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely. I want to go shift now just to Jeffrey Mark Bloom, the founder and producer of 360 Degrees to Success. And on behalf of both of us over here, Jeff, thanks for having us on
Thank
the
you,
show.
Jeff.
Well, thanks. I just want to reiterate, Jeff Deskovic is an amazing person. I've known him for many years now and can't even scratch the surface of what he does in a 30-minute show, or even if we're here for 2 hours. So he is a recurring guest. You know, you should tune in when he's on. And I was just kind of thinking about what you were saying, Andre. And Andre, I just met this evening. You talk about attitude is altitude and being around the right people, right? And I'm locked into the leadership world as well, reading positive books and things like that. And you know the old saying is, you're a product of the books you read, the people you associate yourself with, right? And then I don't know if you heard the saying that if you hang around four broke people, you'll be the fifth one.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's a lot of truth in that, in developing and being around the right people and benefiting from that. So I want to thank you both for being here. Thanks, Jeff, again for coming down. Jeff comes from a long way. And Andre, where are you?
I hail from the Bronx. I'm
the Bronx. So
Jeff.
So you guys came from a ways. So again, I appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you.
Of course, you're both welcome back anytime you want to. If we want to continue this, maybe do it into a series. What we do with Jeff and his story is more or less a series as well, because new things come up and things that he's doing. So again, you're always welcome. And
so maybe my closing thought I'll have just on 360 degrees to success generally. Certainly, even when I'm not on the show, you do interview like a really wide spectrum of guests. So even if it may not be pertaining, to me or criminal justice, I definitely think that I am a fan of the show, so I do watch, and I would encourage other people to watch the show, even when it's not the special episodes involving me.
And I think even when you're not on a show, I always mention you somehow when we're talking, when it's something that's similar or things that people, because the premise of the show is people who have overcome adversity.
Right.
And gone on with their lives and made something of themselves. So I can't even say that without mentioning Jeff at least once or twice.
And we're happy, Jeff, at some point even to extend the opportunity for you to come on the couch, right?
I appreciate it.
However way we frame it, we're happy to have you on too by phone, or if you want to come to the studio, which is a block away from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York.
Great, I will. I'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much to the audience for tuning in. And this was again another episode of 360 Degrees to Success.
Thanks again. And if you want to see more shows, go to 360 Degrees TOSuccess.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and see everybody again next week. Take care.
Got me good in a hole.